Well, one thing that's clear is that uh, I don't think she's running. We've talked about this, but Elizabeth Warren is having impact. She's having impact.
She's having an amazing
Just
impact.
tell, remind people. I mean, I think we mentioned it earlier in the week, but there was a vote basically that had suspended the rules so that the Congress could vote on rolling back I guess, a particular part of Dodd-Frank, specifically the Volcker rule, and it failed.
That's right. And she again stood up, as she has done in the past when she said she was going to break Citigroup. I'm combining News Corp and Citigroup, but that she's going to break them up piece by piece, which to me was the closest any politician has come to the kind of rhetoric that you heard from both Roosevelts in recent years, and some of this rhetoric, ironically, or maybe not ironically, I don't know how we want to look at it, but losing Mario Cuomo over the last week, he was sort of one of the last major national figures that got up and spoke like this, and so. This is what I try to sort of say to people so often, that I think sometimes gets lost when, and this is some of my criticism of those who would say, Obama had a hostile Congress and he couldn't do anything. And I've started to say to people, you're forgetting the power of speech. You're forgetting the power of getting up and persuading, of being a charismatic figure who is passionate and has something to say, and how that can often change an entire dynamic around something. It is still that important. Particularly, it's even more important with a mass media today that can echo that sentiment again and again and again. And yeah, they are trying to gut Dodd-Frank, and as you pointed out, the Volcker rule, and they lost. And yes, there as I pointed out, there are, I guess, 35 Democrats who crossed over. Most of the usual suspects on the New Democrat list. There were a couple shocking surprises who I don't know why, and I'd like to hear why. But most of them were the ones if you follow this stuff closely enough, you come to expect. But it still is an amazing thing, and it shows the ability she's had to frame these issues. I think we're going to see some more of this with the trade deal coming up.
That's going to be huge.
Sherrod Brown, and she'll probably join on those too, but Sherrod Brown has been the passionate voice on that issue, and in the past certainly has made them have to work much harder. He did back even as a congressman in the Clinton administration when they were pushing some of the trade deals. Now as a senator with something as big as this coming along, he could become a huge voice. Bernie Sanders now who's going to run a presidential campaign. Just to have him out there every day banging on this drum about how the middle class has been ignored by this economy. These are all enormous. Elizabeth Warren, I think, obviously has the biggest voice right now. But let's not even say just one of them. Every individual voice, and that's why people who care about this stuff on the left need to be looking at every congressional opportunity in 2016, need to be looking at all these Senate races, because I'll tell you, if it's a Rob Portman here in Ohio, or a Mark Kirk in Illinois, or Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, or Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, or Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, and I can go on, these are all places that can elect a progressive Democrat. If we allow it to become a pro-Wall Street moderate Democrat from any of those places, we're wasting an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the. We're dealing with smaller numbers, obviously, in the Senate and in the House, but it is a more, left-leaning caucus in both places.
Yeah, I look at it as we cut the fat off. If we're going to lose the way we lost, at least we got rid of the John Barrows,
right,
and we got rid of the Mary Landrieux and people like that. And now it's the time to start building from the base. Now Joe Manchin and Claire McCaskill are both talking about running for governor and leaving good. Get lost as far as I'm concerned. So, we should build from the base of changing the culture back in the Democratic Party to, if you're not for certain things, if you're not for equality, if you're not for the middle class, if you're not standing up for what this party was based around, then you're not a Democrat, which which I think, who said the other day, Representative Capuano from Massachusetts, basically, it seems like started a war by saying that the Democrats who supported rolling back Dodd-Frank regulations should call themselves what they really are, Republicans. I mean, the fact that we have Democrats speaking out that way now to taking the party back. You can feel that the momentum is headed in that direction. And every individual voice matters, and you add a couple more to the groups that are there in 2016, and you keep building in that direction, we'll get there, because that's where the American public is. And so Warren's voice is at this time, I can't even say how incredibly important her voice has been after the butt kicking we got. I think it's probably in some ways, although he'd probably never admit it, led the president to be more progressive on things like coming out now. It's given him a left flank so he can come out and support 2 years of free community college,
right,
which he came out for under certain circumstances. And Cuba lifting the embargo, although it helps on that issue that there's some farm state Republicans who are in favor of that too. But
sure,
still, some of these things, having a left flank, a progressive, passionate, charismatic left flank, is enormously helpful.
I mean, let's talk about that community college thing, because this is sort of I would certainly imagine that Elizabeth Warren out there has made it easier for the president on some level, but it definitely feels like, I guess it's possible that 6 months ago they were going like, we're going to hit this community college initiative really hard come January. But frankly, I'm quite convinced that they are now like in the improvisation mode on some level, like where they've been surprised at how little pushback they have gotten. I mean, the president has done a lot of things via executive action over the past 2 months. I mean, that's all we're talking about, right? From the election, November 4th or so, it's now January 9th. I mean, yes. In 2 months, we have basically a deal with China on climate change that he managed to swing without getting Senate approval. We have executive action on immigration, on relations with Cuba. We have, I feel like I'm missing one, but now this community college.
There's the global warming, addressing climate change, and talks with China, and some of that has been moving in a forward direction.
Right,
also,
and
some of the EPA rules also in that direction.
He's made it clear that he is at the very least going to veto any bill that goes around him on Keystone XL, but I think he's also not going to permit Keystone XL. It looks like that.
That's right.
And I think, And
let me throw out, one more, which again, I've talked about on this show, and I always disclose stuff. I've done work on this with Nick Hanauer, who some people know who Nick is.
The overtime thing, right.
Yeah, the overtime. I mean, it's hugely, because Greg Sargent just wrote this up in the Washington Post 2 days ago, that we've taken that from being something where it was expected that President Obama was going to take somewhat of a corporate position and only up this a little bit, to where it was now Greg Sargent called it in his piece, a battle within the Democratic Party between the liberals and moderates. And Sherrod Brown has now again come out forthrightly on this. Jared Bernstein, the liberal economist, was under Biden, and the Obama administration has come out on this. And you're now seeing an enormous amount of pushback saying this is something you can do with a signature, and you're seeing it on this the same way you saw it on Keystone, and it made a difference on Keystone. And we've got a month until the overtime decision is made. But 10 million people and a stimulus and helping the middle class. I'm just saying, you're seeing the liberal wing of the party supported by activist groups, progressive media and others flex its muscles right now. And I'm not saying we're anywhere near where we want to be, but
right.
Let's be honest, this is a very different place from where we were even 5 years ago.
Trending in the right direction.